Marriage is an honorable thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's so godly. Going back to this, marriage is an honorable thing, but marriage is not the highest honor. With this new thing that God is doing, what is God newly requiring in this time, in this season? And one of the things I've been talking about with just my mentees, with other ministers, is that in this season, God is requiring people to do something that they've never done before. And that's very personal. A lot of times people make it a collective thing, like God is requiring us to do this, but it's all dependent upon the demand of what you haven't done in previous seasons and what God is going to want you to do in this season. For example, some people haven't given themselves to fasting, even though in previous seasons, God has called them to fast, or haven't given themselves to prayer, even though in previous seasons, God has told them that you carry a mantle of prayer. You need to give yourself to prayer. So we're just talking about things of that nature. And so what that brought upon was, why don't we do these things? Right? And so it brought up the conversation of idolatry and the idolization that people have, of things, and most especially the idolization that people have of the end goal, the destination. And so we were just talking amongst these different things. And, me and her were just talking, having girl talk, normal girl talk. But I also was triggered in our conversation because I just had a speaking engagement, and it happened to be a women's conference. So we were just talking about, what is it that, Christian women in general, they idolize as it pertains to the end goal of a thing. And the most common thing that we idolize as women is marriage. And not just women. Even Christian men idolize it, because whenever you see maybe a single man in church, or a single woman in church, or a single woman in ministry, and man as well, it's like, okay, who's the perfect person for this person? Or when are you going to get married? And so being that I'm Nigerian American, right, that is even common in a Nigerian culture, right? It's like, okay, when are you going to marry? So people don't even know. I have a sister that's a twin that's married. So it's just that whole aspect. So we're just talking about that because we want to talk about this concept of idolatry. And so, like I said, it triggered something that I just spoke about a few days before, because I was speaking at a women's conference. And one of the things that I told the women, let me just go backtrack. When you go to a women's conference, right, there's young women, there's old women, there's single women, there's married women, there's even divorced women. Yet we can all gather for a conference. We can all gather for a purpose. And yes, people can say, well, you're gathering for God, but there's even a deeper measure to that. So when we're talking about the aspect of idolatry, one thing I said at the women's conference that I even said to my friend last night is that talking about this confine of marriage idolatry, that's what I want to talk about a little bit, is that marriage is an honorable thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's so godly. Going back to this, marriage is an honorable thing, but marriage is not the highest honor, right? That's one thing that people don't really talk about when it comes to that aspect of being in God, because we think that because something is honorable, we have to chase it, right? Because we know it's honorable within. Yeah. However, even God speaks on the concept of seek first the kingdom, right? And everything will be added. So we don't chase the added things. We seek the kingdom. Yeah. So we're just talking about that. And it's just an interesting conversation, because the reason why I bring that back into the aspect of this time and this season is that God is doing away with the idolization of the added things, right? And so when I was speaking about this in the the women's conference rather, and I was speaking on this concept of marriage, that marriage is an honorable thing, but it's not the highest honor. The reason why women of different demographics, the reason why women of different ages can be in the same room is because we're all seeking the highest honor. Because there's single women there that aren't married, right? And there's married women that have gotten to a destination that some single woman would have wanted, yet they're still seeking something, right? So we're in that time where we're having to ask the Lord, what is the highest honor? Because there's still something within that we're searching. There's still something within that we're desiring. There's still something within that, if we make marriage the goal, I'm just using marriage as an example. It could be anything. If we make marriage the goal, if we make having children the goal, we make having money the goal, there's still going to be a longing in our souls for the highest honor. So God is doing something in this season. And this is something me and my friend were talking about last night. I was able to talk about it at a women's conference. The reason why I wanted to even talk about it now is because it shows how much God is bringing people back to the first thing. Yeah. The Bible speaks on this concept in the book of Revelation of returning to your first works, right? The things you used to do. When you want to come into a level of intimacy with God, people say, go to your first love. That's what they would tell you. Yeah. But how do you get back to your first love after being so away from it for so long? You come back to your first love by giving yourself to the first works. So you start praying again. You start fasting again. You start asking God what is required from me. In that process, the first love is rekindled. So we're in this season right now where God is doing away with idols. And he's bringing people to the place of that longing for the first works, to rekindle the first love, to give him the highest honor. We can be chasing so much and longing for so much, and even longing for this ideal of what's my purpose. We have people that's like, I was at a women's conference this past weekend. There's a woman that maybe 50 something, 60 something years old, saying that she doesn't know what her purpose is, and she's been spending the last 20 years of her life rather, looking for that thing. And so you could be chasing all the added things, and you miss God completely, and you're wondering why I'm not coming into the knowledge of what God has called me to. One of the things that I was talking about with my mentorship is that we cannot idolize clarity. Because that's an idol in itself too. It's like, I must know, I need to know. When you give yourself to the first works and you rekindle your first love, you actually don't even care about what tomorrow looks like. We have to get into that place of such an intimacy that we are no longer living in a conscious state of anxiousness. Because when you look at anxiety and all of those different things, it's because we're chasing things that was meant to be added. You know what I mean? So we have this thing where I'm looking for that marriage. I'm looking for that relationship. I'm looking for that job, that wealth. I'm chasing the things that were meant to be added to me. It wasn't meant for me to go and seek it out. I was meant to seek the kingdom. Yeah. So we're just in such an interesting time. And this conversation, I'm telling you, it actually stirs me up, because what God is doing in this time, and the reason why we're seeing so much in the world, so much in government, something has happened recently in the States, and everybody's wondering if it's true, right? Was it fake or was it true? I don't want to talk too much about that. But we're in a place in that hour where we're constantly seeking what is real. And this longing for what is real, it's not going to go away unless we come into the true intimacy of God, right? Because God is truth. And so it's just that aspect. When I was in a women's conference this past weekend, seeing women that were, like I said, single, women that were married, women that were older, rather. I think the oldest person in the room was 88. Yeah. And women that were young, teenage, all in the same room. What are we all looking for? It's not marriage. What are we all looking for? It's not even that aspect of calling, right? Or purpose, rather. We're all looking for God, And so we can even get so confused with this purpose thing. Has God called me to be a preacher? Has God called me to sing? Has God called me to that? That's not purpose. Those are assignments that aid purpose. But what purpose is the longing for God. I'm called in the sense of my purpose to love God, to express his love, to go to places. Now, if that's ministry, that's an assignment along the way. But the thing about what happens when the ministry door is closed? What happens when you're not getting engagement? Is that purpose of loving God and expressing his love that's going to transcend to your family. So your purpose is not supposed to be dependent upon assignments. Your assignment is supposed to aid purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now, if I don't have ministry doors opening, I'm still in purpose because now I have my family that I can express that love to.
Yeah.
If my family, for some reason, is not with me, and now I have the cashier at Sprouts, at Walmart, that I'm able to spread that love to, I'm still in purpose. So we're looking for assignments, but is the aspect of when you go back to the first works, you rekindle the first love, you actually have a different expression of purpose. We're in sensitive times, and some people will think it's not that deep, but just look at the world. We're going through things that it doesn't even make sense. Since 2020, things, pandemics, presidents, all types of stuff, that it's just like, if you just sit down and think, you're like, it's crazy, that we're living through all of this. So if that's not a sign, then I don't know what is. But basically, we're just thinking about the aspect that we're in very sensitive times. We're in a time right now where you have to give yourself to God truly. And I was speaking with my friend last night, and we're talking about this concept of like the new yes, giving God a new yes. And sometimes that sounds so redundant in church. It's like, okay, I've been backsliding, let me get myself back to God. But this new yes has to be, without it sounding so dramatic, it has to be the yes that changes everything. Does that make sense? So not like I just need a refreshing. No, that's not the times that we're living in. We're like, this is the yes that I'm actually walking with God. Can you give me a tissue, please?
Yeah.
This is the yes that I'm actually walking with God. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like that aspect of things that we have to come into in this time. Because what my friend told me last night, also a woman of God, said, what we will do from now to the end of the year is going to determine the next 7 years of our lives, right? You have to ask questions. Why is God demanding something new from me? When I was looking in the room with the woman over the weekend, I was ministering prophetically to some people, but it almost brought me to a level of tears because people have to understand how sensitive these times are, because what you decide to do now is going to determine the trajectory of your life. And that sounds so dramatic, but think about it. Your parents were given moments. Your parents were given seasons. And during that grace period, whenever you have a grace period or a season, you're given the choice to make decisions. You're living off the decisions of your parents, right? What you're coming into is dependent upon that. What you're having to pray against is dependent upon that. What you're having to say no to and yes to. Even the demands that God is requiring from your life right now is the demands that are dependent upon what your parents said yes to, what that could be generational curses, or what they said no to.
Yeah.
So it's so sensitive. So when you put it into that perspective, you're like, okay, well, this season has the ability to determine what my kids go through. This season has the ability to determine what I'll go through in the next 10 years, There's this concept that when you get past certain age marks, even in the realms of the spirit, right? There's things that you begin to have to question. For example, once you get past the age 25, as much as I don't believe in like timelines and deadlines, because I believe in God's timing, but I believe ages come with demands. Does that make sense? When you get past the age 25, I saw like a reel the other day. It was like, man, after age 25, life gets serious. But, and it's true though, and the aspect of even the spiritual realm, right? But it all goes to show that every time has a period, right? Every season, like the Bible talks about in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's times for everything. There's seasons for everything. And we're in a time where there's such a grace to make the right decision. That's why God is demanding healing out of people. I was talking to different people and I'm like, man, there's need for like therapy and counseling, because I'm not anti those things. The need for that is so much right now because you can't go another season making decisions from your wounds. You can't. There's just that aspect in this particular season where it's like, no, I have to heal. I have to grow. I have to know. So when we're just talking about these different topics and these different things, it just brought such a soberness to the time, number one. but it also brought an aspect of, in this particular season of life, it's God or it's nothing. I think about like Esther and all these amazing patriarchs in the faith. They used to say crazy things. It's this or I'll die. If I perish, I perish. But it's because they came into the time, they came into the season, and they had the revelation. My personal definition of confidence. And I feel like this definition applies to godly confidence, but I also feel like it can apply to the concept of manifestation, right? So the definition I gave them for confidence was that confidence is when the God that has found residence in you finds expression through you, right? I'm just going to say this again. That godly confidence is when the God that has found residence in you finds expression through you. And like I said, I feel like that can go for the confidence aspect. That was the definition the Holy Spirit gave me. But I feel like it can also apply to manifestation. This is the season where the God that has decided to find residence in you must find expression through you. So in that regard, we're in that season where it's like, what is stopping God from finding expression through me? Is it me? Is it a generational thing? Is it an ancestral thing? I have to find and figure out how to end that thing, whether that's by my choices, my decisions. And how can I now allow God to truly, truly, truly manifest? Because in this season, like going back to what the Bible says in the book of Romans 8, verse 19, creation is waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. So we're in that hour. That scripture has not been made more real than in this season because creation is waiting for the manifestation. Yeah. So we're in those times.